Only 7 minutes late. Hello everybody, we are live. Can you believe it? I'm here with Dr. Jen Howk today. I know many of you know that. That's why you're here and waiting, not for me, but for Jen. I was going to do a couple of quick announcements before we bring Dr. Jen Howk on the air live to answer your questions about anything. We were kind of started this thing planning to talk about coronavirus related anxiety, but you know, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. We had some technical difficulties, sorry we're late. It's figuring out the software when you bring in another person, but I think we've got it. Don't speak too soon, bro. So a couple of announcements. What do we want to talk about first here? Oh, I wanted to tell you about the free little sauce ebook. If you haven't downloaded it yet, there's a link down below in the description. I told you how Reeves and I have been practicing on making a little sauce ebook that shows you how to use the bottled sauces better. Man, my chat box isn't open. That's because I lost the internet connection on that computer. No big deal. I'll have it here. Pop out chat. Anyway, does it sound like, Reeves, that I'm working? Everybody can hear me? I can't see the chat box from my view. Okay. Reeves is going to field your questions. So Reeves is here. She's in the chat. She's sitting right over here. And she's going to see all of your questions and then post them on the screen for me to read with Dr. Jen Howk. Another announcement, the cheese sauce and mushroom gravy are officially getting shipped to the fulfillment center as of today. I have not gotten confirmation that they're on the truck, but they should be there next week, so we're hoping those will be for sale again next week. I've had a lot of you ask about that. I sent some sauces to Dr. John McDougall this week, and he emailed me today and said, thanks, I look forward to trying your invention. So that was my McDougall fanboy experience for the week. And what else? Anyway, let's bring on Dr. Jen. Dr. Jen, can you hear us from Santa Rosa of California?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Is this working?
You look
yes,
fabulous.
Very good.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. Likewise, likewise.
Let's see how the split screen is going.
Awesome
there's us on the screen together.
Oh my God, it works.
This is for
I
marketing
cannot
purposes.
see that. I can only see you, so yes.
I'm all that matters.
That's true.
I knew that we'd get new people, so I needed to make sure that my shirt was visible as often as possible to get them to subscribe to the channel, because they're all here for you and not me. So
obviously, it should be marketing. Always be marketing. Always be closing.
So, always closing. You sound like Tony Robbins.
The ABCs. Great movie.
So
great.
What movie is it?
Glengarry Glen Ross. It's a play. It's a David Mamet play, but it was made into an amazing film back in the day with Alec Baldwin, and it's an incredible movie. Always be closing. The ABCs of sin. We've gotten off track already.
That we need to watch that movie.
I'm pretty impressed by how quickly we've already gone fully off the rails of what we intended to do today. So that's good. That bodes well.
None of this is going to be on any kind of set topic. I mean, so anyone watching can expect that your time with me and Jen together will be crazy.
Yes, it's true.
Dr. Jen, I am friends with Dr. Jen, and I try to call you Dr. Jen to maintain a level of professionalism, but it's hard to keep calling you Dr. Jen. It's easy for Dr. Lyle because that dude has no friends. You're his only friend and Dr. Goldhammer. So of course I'm going to call him Dr. Lyle. But you I'm actually friends with, so it's very easy for me to just be like Jen, Jen, Jen. Is it cool?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Yes, Dr. Jen feels like it's like a parent of mine or something. So never mind Dr. Howk. Dr. Howk is very patriarchal. So Jen is fine.
Big time.
Yeah.
Patriarchal. Dr. Jen, the question has come up, why do you refer to your own deep explanations as mansplaining? You're not a man.
Oh, because
This is a side question. We're totally off topic still.
So if I wonder if people are completely unfamiliar with the term mansplaining, and it's a sort of creep into culture, but the idea of mansplaining is men explaining things to women that the women already understand. So a lot of women have had this experience where they may have been an actual expert on a subject, and some man comes along and explains what the woman actually knows a lot more about the topic than they do, but they have refine things and explain the details. And so this has been called mansplaining. Rebecca Solnit coined the term. It's made its way into the lexicon. There is no agreed upon female equivalent that I am familiar with. There are many attempts to coin a term, so femsplaining and, womansplaining, but nothing has really gotten the same kind of traction as mansplaining. So I just go with the dominant paradigm. That there, I've splained you.
Did I fix Jen's audio? Everybody is saying you're loud before we get into the good stuff here.
Oh shoot, sorry. I think that's probably my snowball.
Okay. I can turn you down. It's cool.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Did that make any difference? Hello. Talk to us, Jen.
Is that an improvement? I don't want to be overly loud. I'm already kind of loud to begin with, so.
I know you're such a loud person.
I need to be meeker, humbler.
Okay, I've tried to turn you down. I think I've solved it. Talk again.
Okay, did that improve things? Is that better? Is my volume calibrated?
Dylan, they're saying Dylan's too quiet and Jen's too loud. The opposite of what you might expect.
Well, I can move the microphone away, which could help. So does that help? Does that help? Is that an improvement?
Yeah. Yes. Let's go with that.
Okay. Very old school.
All right, so let's get into the questions. So we have, first of all, before we get in, I know a lot of you want to ask hoarding-related questions. Was it Chef AJ with Jen yesterday that answered some of the hoarding questions, Reeves?
Yeah, we talked a bit about that.
So if you have hoarding questions, specifically as it relates to toilet paper or otherwise, check out Chef AJ's excellent interview with Dr. Howk yesterday's episode. Today, and also, what were the other ones we had some, for stats, on the Beat Your Genes episode, we can overview it, of course, but we don't have to get too deep into the mortality statistics numbers that you and Dr. Doug Lyle went into on part 1 and 2 of the Beat Your Genes podcast from last night and last week. Have some of those numbers. We were going to just not be too repetitive.
Anyone who is interested in the nitty-gritty of how we're crunching the numbers and how Dr. Lyle, in particular, as an actual former stats professor, is playing an epidemiologist on TV these days, I would refer them to particularly this week's episode of Beat Your Genes, which I believe is episode 214, where he really goes into great detail about parameter estimates and where we think this thing is going, and the mortality rates put into somewhat helpful perspective. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Whoops. So then, let's get on to the first question. While you're talking, I'll continue to adjust some audio things. So we had a question with everything that's happening right now. Many of my friends have found themselves quickly and suddenly unemployed, and it's really been affecting them. Can you run through and dissect what kinds of feelings this would rouse in a person and why, both due to the loss of income and loss of tribe, and what they can do about how they're feeling and how we can soothe these people's worries that have just totally went from working normal job, everything is good, to out of work and can't leave the house.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in some version of this situation. Either they've lost their job entirely, or their job has been, redefined for the non-specific future. People are losing all kinds of income that already had sort of remote jobs, but required people to come to them in some kind of capacity. So body workers, all kinds of different things. So people are definitely having this experience. So I think the question is getting to the idea of the esteem feedback that comes with work. So this is striking at the heart of evolutionary psychology. So for people who don't know, I hope I'm not still too loud. It looks like you muted me.
No, you're good.
Yourself. So okay. So for people who are unfamiliar, I and Dr. Lyle both come from this paradigm of evolutionary psychology, which is the approach to psychology and to understanding human nature that really locates humans just as another animal among all of the animals on planet Earth. So this is already sort of an unusual way to look at problems. And then beyond that, he and I have created what we call esteem dynamics. So that's the name of our website. And esteem dynamics is really it's looking at the ways in which humans are very esteem dependent, animals in particular. So most animals are not esteem dependent like humans are. Humans are very sensitive to the signals of esteem that they get from one another. And esteem is really just another word for status. Status is sort of the better known word. So we don't work for fun. We don't work even really for money, because money, as far as money goes and money in the bank goes, that doesn't resonate with our Stone Age brain in any kind of meaningful way, because money is a modern invention. So there is no such thing as actual currency in the Stone Age. The only kind of currency that matters in the Stone Age, and therefore to the adaptive process that humans have gone through and drives behavior and motivation today, is status and esteem that we get from one another. So we work primarily to secure esteem signaling and status signaling, both from the people that we work with and work for, but also we want a certain status in the workplace to impress potential mates, to locate ourselves in certain friendship networks, just to sort of locate ourselves in the world, to display to the Stone Age village that we talk about all the time, our talents and our abilities and our capacities and all of the other good reasons that people should give us esteem and value us. And this is, without getting super into the weeds and going really far into the background of this is really important. We care about esteem because we are so dependent on other people for survival through most of our ancestral history. So we're really sensitive to what other people think of us and how they're communicating what they think of us. And we are always seeking new ways to manage people's impressions of us one way or another. A huge amount of human behavior is all about impression management of other people. So when you've got an esteem situation in a status equilibrium that's related to having a certain kind of job, it's not even so much the financial insecurity that is disruptive when you lose that position, although of course that can also be very disruptive. And that's just a whole separate kind of question that we can deal with separately. But the bigger problem is the disruption in your esteem feedback, and this feeling that you get that you no longer have regular cues from the Stone Age village that you're valuable, that you're important, that people are going to be looking out for you if things go badly. So the idea that people are going to be depressed or anxious or have all kinds of unpleasant emotions associated with this kind of event, that should happen. That's the nervous system's way of generating emotions that are reflecting circumstances in a very accurate and well-calibrated way. So there's nothing wrong with you for feeling depressed about the fact that you've lost your job and you're anxious about the future. You're supposed to feel that way. Just like a plane that is about to hit a mountain should have some alarms going off telling it to pull up. Your emotions are giving you feedback that you need to change your behavior to get better esteem. So that's what's happening. And so people are feeling this way very rationally. There's all kinds of different circumstances. So I'd have to know more about the specifics to give anybody really specific advice. But I would say in general, we talked about this on the podcast a little bit this week as well, but we are in the worst part of the uncertainty curve with this thing. And that is more disruptive to people than anything else. People can deal with sort of a turn toward a bad situation because they can run new estimates of how to best optimize that whole situation and create a better outcome for themselves. But when you have great uncertainty and you don't know how bad it's going to get, you don't know how long you're going to be out of work, you don't know if you're going to be able to find a new job, you don't know what the future looks like, you lose what they call, what some political scientists and other scholars call ontological security, which is the idea that you can project your existence into the future and sort of see yourself having a future in some kind of solid way. When you don't have that, that's incredibly dislocating and disruptive and causes a lot of agitation in the system. And it will cause more agitation if you have a personality that is sort of a little more emotionally unstable, a little more prone to getting beaten up by the vicissitudes of life. So this is very much a this too shall pass kind of moment. It's not going to get more uncertain than it is now. It might get worse. I don't think it's going to get worse. Neither does Dr. Lyle. We talked about this a lot on the podcast for the last 2 weeks. But the irony is that even if it does get worse, that carries a level of certainty where at least you can narrow down a cost-benefit analysis and a series of actions in accordance with that cost-benefit analysis that make you feel more secure about your position, even if it's not a great position. It's the uncertainty that is getting to people, and that is not going to last much longer. We are going to know a hell of a lot more in a couple of weeks about this whole situation and where we stand relative to it and what kind of damage we are dealing with at the population level. And so we're on the cusp of a lot more high quality information. We're already getting there.
So what then, to the people that are feeling this way, is just knowing that going to put them at ease? Are there certain, how do they overcome some of that anxiety, or does it just kind of come with the big five, like you said? If someone's a little more emotionally unstable or something, they may have less ability to control those feelings, and you just kind of have to deal with it until it passes.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. There is no special sauce for, not feeling bad, because you're supposed to feel bad. You're supposed to have anxiety and disruption related to a shifted esteem dynamic. That's the way that the machine is supposed to work. So yeah, we're generally, we want to tell people to just have the broader perspective that this is a moment in time that is a very uncomfortable one, that is going to pass, and you are going to be in a position where you can make better estimates about your future and how to adjust your behavior and maximize your odds of getting those esteem signals that you're looking for, and also just stabilizing yourself financially and figuring out how you're going to go forward. You can't figure out how to go forward until you know where you stand, because things are just still, the disruption, the earthquake is still happening. You don't know quite what's fallen off the shelves yet, so you can't start to clean up. But after it's ended and you can you can take stock of things and see where you really are, then you can make a plan, then you can optimize, then you get the self-efficacy of feeling like you're moving forward and improving yourself and your situation in life, even if it takes you in a different direction than you would have intended, even if you have to burn through your savings in the meantime. All of those things are just part of the process as you move into a new paradigm.
Mm-hmm. I liked in the part one of the BYG, the Beat Your Genes podcast episode you guys did, you talked obviously more about the statistics side and death rate not being as high as one would think given the media, social media, etc. Mm-hmm. And what I liked about that was all right, but for a lot of us, we weren't really worrying about dying. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are, in the older age group, there was more concern with what could happen to me. And mm-hmm. I think that we realized, I don't know, I myself am younger, so maybe I'm unique or different from some of the people in my audience that are older that may have taken that side more serious. They didn't want to get sick because then they're sick and they could die. And I think that most of us are at ease with that now. But I appreciated what I felt like was missing from the first episode was that talk about, like, I'm not worried about dying. I'm worried about life going back to normal. I'm not worried about necessarily running out of food, though I could see why that would be a reasonable reaction at first, because none of us that are alive today have ever experienced anything remotely similar to this. So going after food wasn't toilet paper, whatever, but the food thing wasn't crazy. But understanding sort of how to cope with, being stuck at home, losing jobs, those kinds of things, I think that was a lot more, it resonated with me more. I don't know about everybody else, but yeah. So I guess that's more of a comment.
Yeah, well, what this does is it's whatever circumstances that you had in your life that were not optimized, and this is, This could be all kinds of things. You might be in a relationship that you don't really want to be in. You might be in a job that was not really that secure to begin with, or that you didn't want to be in. You might have all kinds of different situations. You might be living in a part of the world that you don't want to be living in. All of these things are being revealed by this moment, and the discomfort with something that was sort of held in really fragile equilibrium has been broken open. And so people are confronting cost benefits on a lot of their life circumstances that were sort of in this little fragile detente, where it was like, it was not great, but it was okay because they'd found ways to kind of work around it, and maybe not talk to their spouse or come back home after they'd gone to sleep, and so they don't have to deal with all their problems, and all of these kinds of ways that people will do little end runs around the conflicts in their lives. This kind of crisis, especially one that locks everybody down at home together, brings all of that kind of crap to the surface and forces you to really confront it. So a lot of the stress that people are feeling is stress that is just an amplified emanation of pre-existing dynamics that were not sustainable and were not serving you anyway. And this whole context is really forcing you into direct confrontation with those dynamics to see if this is something that you can shift and make different decisions for your life, find different relationships, find different experiences, get yourself in a better position of power financially, all of the different things that are going to make you more resilient to this kind of situation in the future. And those are obviously those are uncomfortable, difficult things to do, which is why you haven't done them until now. But the stakes get raised by a moment like this, and sort of reveal to you the true cost of your existing choices and your existing life structures, and ask you if you're willing to continue to pay those costs, or if you would rather pay another cost of going to the trouble of really making some big changes. So this can be an opportunity for people who have felt stuck, who have felt unhappy, who have been struggling with things that they haven't known how to resolve. This is exaggerated things to the level where now they can't ignore it, and the confrontation with these things becomes inevitable, and can be a real opportunity.
Mm-hmm. The other side of it is part of the argument where we're saying that things aren't as bad as they seem, focusing specifically on the mortality rate seems like it can miss the fact that this is really serious. I mean, we see the hospitals being overrun. We see people that would survive if they had a ventilator not have access to ventilators, and all of these kinds of issues. So I hate for that argument of relax, it's not as bad as it seems, to be interpreted as it's not that bad.
Oh, sure.
You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I think it is not as bad as it seems, because you're in a situation where, I said this on the podcast, my parents were both journalists, and they had this phrase that I grew up hearing all the time, which was, if it bleeds, it leads. This is what is going to get advanced to the top of everybody's social media feed, all the headlines and the news, and this relentless drumbeat of information that you're receiving is purposefully exaggerated to keep your eyeballs glued to the source of the news, to continue the advertising revenue. It's also over-representing outlier cases. So in any kind of statistical situation, you have outliers. You can have most people within the bell curve who are going to be experiencing more, fatality rates from this thing are going to be older people, they're going to be smokers, they're going to have comorbidities. But of course, you're going to have outliers in that data pattern, just like you have outliers in every data pattern. And then the news cycle is going to seize on those outliers, those unusual cases, those cases that are really scary, the ones that make you think that, oh, I'm equally at risk of this. And anything that also anticipates crisis level as far as ventilator supplies or overburdened hospitals and overburdened staffs. If that is present anywhere, it's going to be front and center on everybody's information environment. So people just need to be sort of really aware that they are consumers of information in that sense, and it's not necessarily representative of the whole big picture and the whole broad truth of the whole situation. But I think there's a difference between recognizing that it's not as bad as it might look according to the people who really benefit from the worst case scenario story that's being put forward. And it is quite bad. It is quite bad. It is a big mess, and it is a big stress on our existing institutions and our systems. I do not think that is a stress that is going to result in absolute collapse of those systems. I think that these systems are resilient to this kind of stress. They just have not confronted it before. They haven't been subjected to this kind of relentless onslaught, these sorts of numbers, essentially 2 flu seasons in 1 year. That's the equivalent of the burden on the system, is that it might be something close to double the normal flu season. And that is much more than the system is accustomed to, and it's going to push it to its limits. Whether that ushers in a full-blown collapse or not, I don't think it will. Dr. Lyle doesn't think it will. We think we know enough about this, and we have flattened the curve and continue to flatten the curve to some degree to anticipate that and mitigate it. But that doesn't mean that it's not a big deal, and that it's very messy, and it's very destructive, and it's causing a great many people a lot of suffering. Those are different things in a different way to look at this problem.
It's just important to understand that just because, maybe the death rate isn't as high as everybody perceives
totally.
because of media or whatever, that doesn't mean this is media fabricated and no big deal, and we should be business as usual out going back to the movies and sports and all these things.
No.
And I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah, and if people are interpreting Dr. Lyle and I saying that it's business as usual and go to the movies and go on vacation, we're absolutely not saying that. I'm locked at home with my crazy dogs. He's locked at home with his cats. Like we are practicing what we preach. We believe in the power of flattening the curve and think that that's very important. And I'm just as appalled as everyone else is by my neighbors out having a block party in the parking lot the other night, and like people continuing to revel and be very cavalier about this. And I certainly don't think it's any kind of conspiracy. I don't, my tinfoil hat is not adjusted in that particular direction. So I think we are dealing with a major public health crisis that is going to push our institutions and our systems to the limit. And that it's really not prepared for. But I don't think it is a full-blown catastrophe from which we can't recover. I think it's just going to be a big mess for quite a while.
I feel like we do now have potential of preparing for something like this. Now that it's happened once in our lifetimes, we can all perceive a time when it might happen again in the future, and perhaps we'll be better prepared with better manuals and better supplies and all of these things. Good thing it wasn't. It didn't. It's a nice thought. Is it too nice? Is it too optimistic?
I think it's asking a lot of human nature to anticipate that lessons will be learned across the board in that way. I think the upper conscientious half of the bell curve will be better prepared, and maybe that's all it takes to make this much less impactful next time. But this is an inference that people will make, is that everybody shares this experience, goes through this thing, and everyone will learn the lesson equally. Everyone doesn't learn the lesson equally because everyone's not capable of equally learning the lesson. Your personality places major constraints on what you're going to absorb from any given experience and how you're going to integrate that and apply it going forward. And if you're not very conscientious to begin with, you're out there having a block party today, and you're not going to prepare anymore for next time. You're going to continue to be the person that you are, crisis after crisis after crisis. So, but if the upper conscientious half of the bell curve learns from it, makes some adjustments, prepares more diligently for next time, that may be enough to improve everyone's collective experience. And the conscientious people will continue to subsidize the existence of the low conscientious people, just like they always have and always will. So in that sense, then perhaps. Yeah.
So we have one person, LVM asks, I just listened to your recent talk on your website about your openness. I'm curious why you think evolutionary psychology is true when you had bouts of certainty with Marxism and astrology that have passed. Do you want to jump into that? It's kind of a fun one.
That's interesting.
It's not so common.
Yeah, it's not a common trajectory. So I have always been, my openness has made, so openness, just to back up really quickly for people who may not be familiar with what we're talking about, this is one of the big five personality characteristics that we use in evolutionary psychology and behavioral genetics to explain the fundamental nature of individuals. So we can talk about human nature and sort of the collective experience of all humans. But within that, there are individual differences. Not, Dylan and I have different personalities. And so we're going to interpret reality in slightly different ways, filtered through our personality attributes. And the way that we primarily measure personality in evolutionary psychology is with what we call the big five. And the big five are openness, how open to new experience you are, which is like how adventurous and novelty seeking you are. Conscientiousness, which we just talked about. Conscientiousness is like how much of a rule follower you are, how worried you are about doing the right thing. How extroverted you are is number 3 versus introverted, how agreeable you are, and how emotionally stable you are. So if you know the answer to those 5 questions, you know a lot about yourself. These are very broad strokes, and they don't describe every single personality attribute, but these are very key sources of how you're looking at the world and how you make decisions. And these are genetic. So we know from over 15 million studies of pairs of twins that were raised in extremely different environments and wound up with basically the same personality. We have replicated this over and over again and shown the genetic origins of personality and pretty much everything else. So when someone is asking about my openness, I am very open. When I take a big 5 test, I'm usually somewhere between the 90th and 95th percentile, sometimes higher depending on the test, for what is called openness. I am very creative, I'm very curious, I'm very intellectually curious, and I've always been a big truth seeker in my life. That has always been like a major motivating drive that I've had. Like, what makes it all, what's the meaning of it all? What makes it all work? What's the meaning of life? That has been really sort of my greatest pursuit in life since I was very small. And that took me down many a false yellow brick road in the pursuit of truth. So I wandered into a lot of different belief systems and value systems, including New Age thinking, various spiritual traditions, various Buddhist lineages, all kinds of different things, various political affiliations. And I always was seeking that resonance, that sort of like, I found it. It all makes sense. Everything is integrated and aligns and makes sense. And I kept.
But did you feel that with those other things? Did you
No.
feel this? I mean, you obviously have a greater degree of confidence with what you're doing now than the other ones, like
right, and
astrology.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Is like you don't know until you know, right? You just keep seeking until you find it. And so I kept seeking, and it never quite felt right. But it was close. I would find things that felt close, and for one reason or another. And I actually look back at my astrology days. And working as an astrologer. And I can see that now as just an expression of my obsession with individual differences in personality and recognizing that people did have this sort of built-in tendency to be different from one another and trying to find a framework for explaining that. And astrology was the best I could come up with because I was extremely resistant to something like evolutionary psychology, which I had encountered at various points. Oh, yeah. I heard about this thing when I was still in high school, and I was like, that is anti-feminist, bro-science BS. Like, I have no interest in this. This is telling me that my entire purpose in life is to survive and reproduce and make babies, and that I'm useless after menopause, and that men just exist to spread their seeds, and like all this terrible, like very cliched interpretation of what evolutionary psychology is about. And so I just rejected the whole worldview and went wandering into these different roads. And I never quite felt that resonance, that true integration, until I came back around to the intellectual foundations of evolutionary psychology with some pretty serious social science training and statistical training, and got clobbered over the head with the data over and over and over again, and started to see, oh, actually, this is what it is. This is how it works. This is what is explaining our behavior. This is what explains our emotional dynamics. All the esteem stuff I was talking about before, it just all came together for me. So I never felt that at home feeling with the truth until I found EP. So that's why I have the confidence that I have in it now. It's not an ideologically driven confidence. It is a firm knowledge of consilience that everything lines up, everything filters into evolutionary theory, and there's nothing is out of place, and everything is perfectly explained. So I live in that territory now and find it incredibly useful for understanding my own behavior, understanding social problems, applying it pretty much to everything that I do all the time, relentlessly.
So we have a sarcastic follow-up for Dr. Jen. If we're sheltering and keeping distance, then how do we attract a mate? Decorate our balconies, designer face masks?
It's funny. I am my social media feed, is aware of the sorts of things that I'm interested in and the things that I click on, and it follows me around the internet, and it knows what what my market niches are. So I've been getting all these ads for various online dating services that are trying to rebrand and remarket themselves in a time of quarantine. And it's like, oh, you don't have to leave your house to date. Virtual dating is now a thing. And so like 4 different major online dating brands have run toward this kind of idea that, oh, this is actually better because now you can really get to know somebody and really, build a connection. And it's interesting. It's interesting to watch it. So yes, I suppose work on your display, pursue virtual connections. Definitely don't go to the bar. But you shouldn't be going to the bar
Snapchat.
Anyway. Yeah.
How are you holding up with all this openness that you've got? You must be losing your brain stuck at home. Am I wrong?
It's interesting. It's that, so I have, my personality is pretty much ideal for this kind of situation other than my openness. I'm quite introverted. I'm very emotionally stable. I'm very agreeable. So it's not that big a deal for me. I'm not feeling a lot of volatility around it, but my openness is challenged for sure. I'm definitely going a little stir crazy. Definitely slowly hating my neighbors a little more every day, and I live alone, fortunately, so I don't have any simmering interpersonal dynamics that are becoming toxic on me. But my openness is definitely running up against some constraints, and it's frustrating. So what I'm doing to get through that is what I would recommend that other people who have a lot of openness do, which is you do what we call mathematize the misery. So Dr. Lyle is infamous for breaking things down into math problems, sometimes a little impersonally. So that if you can mathematize a problem, what that means is that you're recognizing that the suffering is not forever, that you've got a certain amount of time, and then this too shall pass. I don't know that we're going back to anything. I don't know that we're going back to normal life, but we're going back to something that is normal adjacent, that we're not going to be in this situation forever. And so I, on the outside, am sort of mathematizing that for myself by midsummer. I think that certain politicians... That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, certain politicians. So I'm watching this real split experience in the public sphere and in the media and in politics, that you have exaggerated claims on both sides. You have sort of the left half of the political sphere catastrophizing, this is the worst thing that has ever happened, we're never going to recover from this, it's an absolute disaster, it's going to be years of repeated lockdowns and suffering. And then you have the right side of the political distribution saying, oh, we're going to be filling churches by Easter, it's all going to be fine, no big deal, we're 2 weeks and we're out of this thing. I think both of those are exaggerated for political leverage and political purposes, since we're sitting here in an election year. And we would do well to sort of strike some middle ground there. And I think that, by midsummer, and this is just based on estimates looking at other experiences and awareness of the fact that no pandemic is going to increase indefinitely. This thing is going to run through the population, even according to the worst case scenario. It runs through the population, and then it hits both the herd immunity wall, and it has its own logic where its own bell curve starts to decline. So even by the worst case scenario, that decline starts around June, July. We are not going to be in the same kind of situation that we're in now. So I mathematize my own experience that way and sort of just push back all of my openness circuits and tell myself, well, go ahead and live it up and have all that novelty seeking that I'm having to suppress right now later in the summer, just in time for my birthday.
It's going to be real rock and roll.
Yeah.
Come
yeah.
summer.
That's right. Well, that's, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think if I really were pressed on it, I would think it would be early on that. I think it's probably actually May, early June. But for my own mathematizing conservative high C tendencies, I just am telling myself, okay, mid-June. Mid-June seems like a reasonable bet.
When's your birthday again? What's your sign, I mean?
It's late July. I'm a Leo. Thanks, Dylan.
I already knew. Okay.
Leo sun, Aries moon, Aquarius rising, Venus in Virgo, So that's all you need to know about me.
Got it. Taurus. That's all I know about me.
Yeah, there you go.
I am 45. This isn't me now. This is a question. I am 45 and identifying myself as a person with self-love deficit, which makes me a perfect partner for narcissists. Can you please shed more light on traits in the big five that make one's deficit in self-love and workarounds to beat those genes?
Yeah. So this sounds like somebody who is, they have a little bit of what we call the sucker triad. So the sucker triad is that you're open, you're somewhat open to new experiences and new people. You're very conscientious, so you really want to do the right thing, and you're very agreeable. So by nature of being very agreeable, you're likely to get yourself into relationships with more disagreeable people because that relationship has a certain equilibrium. So the disagreeable person wants a little more than their fair share, and the agreeable person is just systematically undervaluing themselves and is offering a little more than half. And so together they find a nice little stable equilibrium where the disagreeable person sort of gets away with a little bit more, is a little bit of a jerk, and the agreeable person just kind of goes along with it and is cooperative. And so that dynamic is what a lot of therapists will call codependence. So I spent many years in my 20s and 30s going to traditional therapists because I was concerned that I was a codependent because I'd grown up in an addictive family with alcohol and drug abuse, and that I had learned these patterns and that I was drawn to these disagreeable addict people myself because I was trying to recreate childhood patterns, et cetera, when really I just had the kind of personality that this person is describing. I am very conscientious and very agreeable. I might as well have a big S for sucker on my forehead. And I was systematically getting sort of drawn into and exploited by disagreeable people, which is what a narcissist is. When we say someone is a narcissist, it's just another word for somebody who's very high on the disagreeable spectrum because they're walking through life feeling like they're not quite getting a fair deal. They deserve more, and they deserve more from you, and they're entitled to it. And so they're a little more in their own experience that way. So your lack of self-love is really just agreeableness that is undervaluing who it is that you are in that relationship. So this is like everything else. The path out of that, you can't change who you are. You can't change the fact that you're very agreeable, that you're likely to fall into these kinds of dynamics because you're walking around as if you're for sale, you're on sale, you're cheap relative to other people that disagreeable people would want to exploit, either as romantic partners or as employees. Or even as friends. Disagreeable people will take advantage of agreeable people in all three domains. So if you have that tendency and you're sort of undervaluing yourself and feeling crappy about yourself, the first thing is to be aware that is a dynamic that you are likely to get yourself into. And the second is to really turn your energy toward developing self-esteem. And processes that are going to build the self-esteem mechanism, which Dr. Lyle and I have talked about a lot in a lot of different places. I have a video on that on my YouTube channel as well. But essentially, self-esteem is another word for pride. And self-esteem comes from applying yourself very consistently and diligently to doing a very good job to improving your circumstances to be more competitive in life. So if you have a goal to improve your station in life, to get a better job, to lose weight, to find a better mate, that goal always has little steps on the way to accomplishing it. And the more you apply yourself to those little steps on a consistent, regular basis and impress yourself with the fact that you've done the little steps, that unleashes the process of pride and self-esteem, which is the only antidote to the self-loathing that you feel from the lack of external esteem that you get from other people. So that would just be how I would change your compass around and try to live in a way that is you're pursuing self-esteem before you're looking for love or esteem from other people, and then keep your radar up for people being disagreeable and taking advantage of you, because it's very likely that you're getting yourself into that situation a lot.
All right. Good answer.
God,
we have a lot of people asking
I've
about...
lived that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's been my experience. I've been a sucker for a long time.
And you did exactly what you just prescribed? That's how it went down for you?
Yeah.
Did you figure it out before evolutionary psychology? That's my question.
I sort of did. I sort of stumbled into it. That's part of why evolutionary psychology carried a lot of resonance. I think sometimes, this just goes back to the earlier question briefly, but I think sometimes you have to live a little bit and make a lot of mistakes and become a little aware of your own patterns and your own tendencies to have an appreciation of the genetic origins of behavioral genetics and their application to evolutionary psychology. I think a little wisdom and life experience gives you the context to resonate more with the truth of evolutionary psychology. I know that was true in my case. When I was younger and more idealistic and thought that I could, through the sheer force of effort and will, I could somehow transform my existence and make things happen for myself in a certain kind of way. I had to run into the wall of those goals a few times before I started to recognize what was really going on.
All right. We have some questions about people stuck at home that are eating more than they want to be eating. What do we tell the people that are at home getting into trouble with the food?
Well, what's it doing in your house, for one thing? So it's getting into your house. Getting into your house somehow. So if even if you've got kind of non-ideal food in your house usually, and you've been fine and you have enough willpower to stay out of it because it's your kid's food or your husband's food or whatever, this kind of context where you're in a uncertain crisis kind of situation is going to increase the urgency of trying to solve your most relevant survival and reproduction problems. So your poor little Stone Age brain is saying, hey, what is the most sure thing that I can do to guarantee my genetic survival? This is why the pleasure trap is as potent as it is. And if you have a vegan pizza that's been in your freezer for the last 3 months that hasn't interested you, suddenly when you're running the algorithm on I'm really concerned about my survival and reproduction because I'm in a state of uncertainty and I don't know how to optimize my time and energy, what's the best thing that I could do that's like a sure bet? Oh, there's that vegan pizza in the freezer. I think it's time to eat it. I think it's time to get into it because that is linked to a lot of feedback from my dopamine pleasure pathways and other internal processes that I'm doing the right thing, that I'm ensuring my genetic survival. So the stakes get higher and the pleasure trap gets more difficult to avoid when you get out of your groove and you're disrupted and you're in a situation where it's like, oh my God, what do I do? How do I optimize my existence right now? So if there's any supernormal food in your environment, you are almost certain to get into it. The only way that you could possibly stay out of it at this point is to have either a personality that is so emotionally stable that you're absolutely undisturbed by what's going on in the world, or you have such high motivation for staying out of the pleasure trap. You have major health issues. You have some other kind of extremely powerful motivation to keep you out. Then you might be okay. But mere mortals are going to get into whatever high density food they have around. So, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth, as Chef AJ says, and the only thing you have control over is your environment. All of that said, I would also just bring the same context to this question as I did with the other ones, which is that this too shall pass. You're not ruining your life by undoing a little bit of your hard work that you have done for the last couple of months or couple of years. This is a short-term weird little moment in history, and we're going to get through it, and things are going to go back to more stability and more security and more knowledge about your context, and you're going to get back in the groove that you were in before. So don't catastrophize.
You're also a little bored too, probably.
Sure. Well, you're bored, and your anxiety is also hunting around for a little steady dopamine drip, which you're going to get chewing on anything. So dopamine is associated with eating any kind of food. It's not just super normal food. You don't have to eat vegan ice cream to get dopamine. You get dopamine from carrot sticks. So, and it's a pleasure. It's a little pleasant feeling that is going to soothe the nervous system a little bit. So it's absolutely normal that if you're sitting at home and you don't have anything better to do and you've got any food around, you're going to be sort of gnawing on it and trying to soothe the system a little bit. You just want to make sure that your house is mostly full of whole plant food that is more ancestrally congruent and not super normal, because that's what's going to get you into trouble.
Here's a good one. Emma says, why are others so obsessed with our way of eating? Others bring it up ad nauseum, not me. I don't remember anyone making a single remark when I used to eat cookies for breakfast and ice cream for dinner. I just want to go about my day without my diet being a topic.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really common experience for people who start to shift into any kind of healthier eating pattern. And you're essentially, when you go to make a big behavioral change by changing your diet, you're sending a signal to the people around you that, hey, I'm going to start to make an effort to improve my competitive position in this Stone Age village that we all live in. And what that does is it threatens their status, because it's like high school. Everybody's walking around, they kind of know where they are in the pecking order of things, and they're like, okay, well, I'm not number 1, but I'm number 3, and that's pretty cool, because as long as you're number 4, you're below me, and I feel nice and secure in that situation. But if you're sitting there in number 4, and you tell number 3, no, I think I'm gonna get really serious about this healthy eating thing and lose 40 pounds and really make a difference in my life, and I think it's time to get my act together. That is extremely alarming to the person in position number 3, because they start to perceive that you are making a play for their position in the hierarchy. So this is like the little ancestral Stone Age algorithms of village life that are churning away in the background all the time. And whether people are conscious of it or not, they're going to feel very agitated when you start to improve your circumstances. And so one of the strategies that certain types of people will engage in when they feel threatened, when they feel status deficient, is that they'll try to talk you out of it. They'll try to sabotage you. They'll bring cookies to work and say, I made them just for you. Don't you want them? They'll tell you that you're not getting enough protein. They'll tell you that you don't know what you're doing. You're harming your health. They'll tell you you're being a diva and you're being too demanding and you're making a big fuss about things. All of these sorts of things are status defense strategies that other people are deploying, not because they're bad people or because they're not at some level wanting the best for you, but because they're an animal that's under threat, and that status is the most relevant thing in the Stone Age village, because if you don't have it, you're dead. So people want to kind of hang on to their position, and they get, again, uncertainty is sort of the worst thing that can happen in that context. And if you've sort of added a little turbulence to the system, that's going to be very upsetting to people.
So how do we sort of disarm them when this is going on, when they're bringing it up all the time, other than yelling at them, shut up?
Yeah. Well, if you're disagreeable, yelling at them to shut up is a fine strategy. I've seen Alan Goldhammer do that. Alan Goldhammer, if somebody offers him some non-compliant food, he'll make a face and he'll say, no, I don't want to get sick and die. Like, no, I don't want your pus-filled, dessert. Like, no, I don't want that. The more agreeable among us have to get a little more Jedi mind trick about this. So my favorite strategy when somebody kind of comes after me with this sort of thing and says, well, where are you going to get your protein? Aren't you worried about nutritional deficiencies? I just play real dumb. And I say, well, I don't know. I guess, I don't know. My doctor seems to think it's okay. You're basically, you're soothing their status anxiety by making it seem like you don't know what you're actually doing. The more you act like an expert and say, oh, well, actually, I'm doing this because I read this book called The China Study, and then I watched 4 different documentaries on plant-based living, and I got to tell you that the science is really clear, and you're making a mistake by not doing this, and I know something you don't know. all of that, all things equal, is very threatening to people who are already feeling.
I used to do that.
Yeah, a lot of us did. Like, because you have a teaching gene, you have this desire to bring new information that is useful back to the village, because that might get you some status. But the short-term strategy here is that you're threatening people's position. And so very often the right thing to do is just to play dumb, to be like, I've been having some issues with my health, and my doctor just wants me to try this for a while, and I don't know, it may or may not work, probably won't, but I'm just going to give it a shot and, see what happens. It seems to be working okay so far. So you're just really, you're doing what we call showing belly. You're like rolling over like a little, like a helpless little, like, I'm not a threat, I'm not coming for your status. And that will soothe a lot of people, and they will calm down and be less critical and challenging of you. But there are other specific things that we can do depending on the context.
All right, here's a good one. Kathy asks, any tips on responding to a husband who says, I live here too, and you need to use your willpower, when you ask him to stop buying or at least lock up his snacks that you want to avoid for your health and weight loss efforts?
Wow. Well, it sounds like you're dealing with a pretty disagreeable human there, because this becomes sort of the dynamics of a relationship that are pretty suboptimal. This is the kind of thing that's going to become very clear in a moment of quarantined crisis. Like all things equal, you don't want to be married to somebody who's not rooting for you and not trying to help you be as successful as you can with important health goals. And willpower does not apply when it comes to the pleasure trap. So I would hand him a copy of the book, The Pleasure Trap, and have him read it, or at least steer him towards some of the talks on the subject. But the fact is, some people can't be convinced of this, and they're going to stick very stubbornly to their preconceived notions of the world, and continue to believe that, you just need to eat less and move more. What's the problem? When really willpower in the face of the pleasure trap is powerless. You've got barbarians at the gate every day, and no matter how much willpower you have, you can hold it back for some amount of time. But at some point, there's a gap in your defenses. You have a situation where there's a pandemic and a lockdown. You have some disruption of your usual routine. You're tired. You just get out of the usual groove. And if there is super normal food in the environment, you will get into it. It is really just a matter of time, unless you have such an unusual personality that does not apply, which is like, I've met like 4 of those people: Chef AJ, Alan Goldhammer. There's a couple of people in the world who have the personality that is not going to buckle in the face of temptation. But most of us, at some point, if the stress is high enough and the disruption to our routine is significant enough and the food is tempting enough, it's just a matter of time before you slip and get into it. It's an alcoholic working at a bar. So I would look really carefully at the dynamics in that relationship and consider what the overall cost benefit analysis on cohabitating with them is, and maybe you want to move out for a while. But at the very least, he should be locking up his snacks.
That's pretty common. I mean, you're not alone. This is a pretty common one, I think, with this, especially with our age group, people that have been married for a long time, and they're making this big change, and they feel like, well, I'm the one who changed, so it's my problem, not his. And that's not really good. Yeah.
It's not, the fact is you cannot be expected to successfully resolve this problem if your environment is not clean. So you have to do whatever you can do to get your environment clean. And if he refuses to lock up that food or not buy it or not bring it into the house, then you have to look at other ways to get your environment clean, including possibly living separately for a while. Like this is what it all comes down to. There's always a way to resolve the problem, but the resolution sometimes is a very high cost that we don't want to pay. There's always a way to solve it. It's all a cost benefit analysis. And so you just have to you do a thought experiment, like what would be the circumstances that would make me successful? And am I willing to create those circumstances or not? And if you're not, then you just know that you're not, and so you can't expect the situation to change or the outcome to change because you haven't changed the inputs into the system. So this is how every different analysis happens in the computer that is the brain. So Dr. Lisle has a famous story where he had a client who lived next to a 7-Eleven and couldn't stop himself from going to the 7-Eleven every night to get Twinkies and big gulps or whatever he was getting. He said, Dr. Lisle, what can I do? How do I develop more willpower to stay out of that 7-Eleven? And he's like, no, I'm sorry, you have to move. You just have to move. You cannot continue to live next to it because it is just, it's in your environment essentially. And there is no reason to expect that you're going to be able to defeat that. You cannot. If I left my dogs sitting alone in the house with, fresh pizza sitting on the counter and I go for a walk, I'm going to come back and they're going to have eaten pizza no matter how I tell them don't do that. You're going to get in a lot of trouble. So you are a slightly more sophisticated version of that animal. You have a slightly bigger brain and you can run a slightly more complex cost-benefit analysis, but the drive is the same. The fundamentals are the same. And it is not your fault that you can't stay out of this. This is your ancestral mandate. Starvation killed more of your ancestors than anything else. You are hardwired to seek out the richest food in the environment and to eat as much of it as quickly as you possibly can before it goes away and before you starve to death. This is how you're wired. It's why you survived. So if it's in your house, you've already shown that you can't resist it. That the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. You've got to change the environment.
I think this is a core topic, especially for those of you who are new, understanding that you can't just rely on your willpower to stay away from treats and snacks. I have a YouTube channel. I'm kind of known for being good at this, but if that stuff is in my house, there's no way. I mean, chips, are you kidding me?
Me too,
I will
absolutely.
eat them right now. I'll try not to do it on live video, but it'll happen right after.
Yeah, everybody I know in the plant-based world, with the exception of AJ and Ellen Goldhammer, has some susceptibility to the pleasure trap if the stuff is in their environment. Of course they do. This is how it is. So, and I think people get a little confused too because they have an intuition that they do have willpower at times, and everybody does have a willpower threshold. You have situational willpower where when your motivation is very high and you're just starting out and you're doing a good job and you're seeking the self-efficacy that comes with the process of building a routine, you're going to have an easier time. You're going to feel like you've got willpower of steel. And so when you do slip and you get into it, it feels like that's a failure of willpower. It doesn't feel like it's just an inevitability of a bad environment and an animal that's susceptible to the pleasure trap, because that's what it is. So I think people's intuition of willpower gets a little haywire because they've witnessed themselves say no before. And of course you can say no for a while. You can say no if the circumstances are you've got a strong routine, you're feeling really good, you got a full tank of glycogen, you're feeling like you're on top of the problem. It's a whole different situation when you're in quarantine with your husband and there's a bunch of junky food around.
Yeah. Real quick, Shirley, thank you so much for the very generous super chat. Howie, Amber, happy birthday, by the way, Amber, and thank you for the super chat.
Oh,
shout
happy
out
birthday.
to Reebs for manning the chat box.
Yay.
Reebs has been fielding us questions. But yeah, I mean, these are the core concepts that, we were talking about. How did you know Evo Psych was the thing? Well, for me, I knew it was the thing when I was in, and thank you, Paul, very much for another super chat. Bring back Dr. Jen more often, he says. That's Reeb's dad.
Oh, yay,
and
thanks.
I agree, we'll have to do this more. But I was first introduced to this after, through the food side of it, finding Dr. Lisle through like McDougall, for example. Mm-hmm. And then reading The Pleasure Trap and being like, oh, okay. And understanding that you're not broken, you're in an environment with garbage, of course you're gonna eat it. Some people are a little better at avoiding it than others, but at the end of the day, it's all gonna happen. You're not,
right.
You're not broken in that our bodies are a little bit different. Some people can get away with eating garbage. It's normal that, we're seeking the richest food in our environment. All of these core concepts of Evo Psych as it relates to the food was what, for me, was just like, click, we're there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the core tenet of evolutionary psychology is like imagine yourself in the Stone Age. How did you try to solve this problem in the Stone Age? And how is that a maladaptive solution for the modern environment? And how you tried to solve the problem of food and nutrition and getting enough of it in the Stone Age was, oh, this is scarce. This is really precious and it's really tough to get enough calories. And so if you see calories, the right thing to do always is to eat them. And if you have a choice between some leaves off of a tree and some meat, you better eat the meat because you don't want to waste all of the chewing and the effort on the leaves when the meat's going to go bad and you don't know when the next hunt's going to come along. So, the equivalent of meat in the modern environment being this overly processed vegan junk food that even plant-based people will get into. You're always going to gravitate to more calories per bite if it is in your environment, all things equal, because this is what millions of years of evolution was constantly reiterating and pointing all of us towards. So the only reason your genes are here on this planet today is because your ancestors repeatedly made the choice to eat rich food, and that was selected for in the natural selection process. And so you are a creature that is completely selected for your desire for rich food. So that's just what it is. And only for the last 100 years have we been in an environment of abundance and not scarcity. And so now it's all backwards. Now you have the wrong genes for the environment, when for all of your ancestral history, you were developing those genes so you could survive. And so now it's like, oh, haha, psych, fooled you. Like, now you're wired backwards for the right environment. And this is just a very unusual problem. So it's not your fault. It's the environment's fault. So you got to change the environment.
Is it going to change on its own? What's going to happen 50, 100 years from now? I mean, we're not going to, the rich foods, it's not going to stop.
It's not going to stop.
Do you see this core problem ever changing in any way?
I think we are very close to equilibrium with the problem, in the sense that when you look across the population, pretty much everyone in the population is eating as much of whatever kind of food they want to eat, at least in the Western developed world. And so you're watching the natural distribution of the genes in the population, where you see whatever percentage of people are overweight and obese. Those are the people who are predisposed for that level of obesity in this kind of food environment. It's not because they're eating different food. Everyone's eating the same food. But you're seeing the natural distribution. If people are, 90% of the variance of obesity is genetic. And you're watching that. You're watching it in the population because everyone's eating the same food. So people who eat a very rich diet of the standard American fare, some of them won't gain any extra weight. Some of them will gain like 10% of their weight. Some of them will gain 50% of their weight. You just see the whole distribution, and that's what's happening. So I think we're very closely hitting saturation as far as watching both the genetics of obesity and personality of it, because you do have some hyper conscientious people who are able to sort of hold the problem at bay through something that we would call willpower. Or something willpower-like. And so that influences that a little bit too, but that's also not going to change. So what you see now is very likely to stay more or less stable. Maybe we'll increase the percentages a little bit, but I think we've basically hit the ceiling, and that will become eventually the global norm, as long as the food environment doesn't massively change. And I think if anything, the food environment's just going to become more concentrated, more supernormal. These food scientists are, diligently working every day to get to the bliss point of this highly engineered food to make it absolutely irresistible to people. So, yeah,
I do see us going more toward a vegan diet, but not a healthy vegan diet.
Yeah.
I think that animal agriculture, in my estimation, will be a much smaller portion of calories than today. Not that helps what we're talking about.
Yeah, I certainly hope
thing I feel.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I hope that is true, but yeah, it doesn't reflect on the calorie density of the diet, which will remain very, very high, because that's what people will seek out. Yeah.
And I can see that I could see the medical system get better at treating some. Well, I use the word treating, but you know what I mean. At hiding some of these issues, like that might make people think that they can get away with it. But at the end of the day, I don't see how any form of medicine is going to really mask or eliminate something as serious as a heart attack or type 2 diabetes. Like, I don't think there's going to be a magic drug. Maybe
No.
we'll get a little closer, but this is still going to be the way.
Yeah, I
Our
think
way.
this is the situation normal for the species in this super normal food environment. So this, and this brings us back to the central point, which is that it's your life, it's you and the food, it's you and your choices and the food, and running that cost benefit analysis on what can you do to improve your individual circumstances. Get out of the business of worrying about what other people are doing, even people in your family. It is not, you can't change them. They're running their own cost benefit analysis. They have their own personality issues that are shaping their response to this reality. Everybody is experiencing reality so differently, both because their personality is informing a different estimate of reality, and also because of the ways in which people kind of polarize themselves into different positions and ideologies with social media and confirmation bias and all of these processes that sort of hijack the system that makes those sorts of assessments. So focus on you, focus on your life, your happiness, optimizing your existence, putting yourself in the optimal environment that is best for the animal that you are, choosing your environment wisely, and surrounding yourself with people who are the best people that you can spend your time with, and that you love, and that love you, and that contribute to really good reciprocal esteem processes. That's your job. That's all you need to focus on, and eat lots of good food and get lots of sleep and wait for the craziness to pass.
I mean, this is a great opportunity to make a plan for when things go to normal, you know?
Yeah.
Start your first 30-day challenge.
Sure.
Get ready to move out and move to a different place that's, you know, geographically better for your personality type. These are big opportunities. Get rid of that job that you just, you know, change industries if it wasn't working for you, and because maybe you just got laid off. That's
it's really, this is the silver lining of this kind of thing. It's like, and it's not, you know, my openness used to interpret this as, oh, well, it's this is meant to be, and the universe has a plan or whatever. But it's really, you're just the cost benefit just got tightened on you, and you know, there's this sort of situation doesn't transform anybody. It reveals what's already there. It exaggerates the existing dynamics that exist within us and between us and other people and the situations that we found ourselves in. And if those are situations and dynamics that are undermining your happiness, then this is an opportunity to really reflect on that and to make a plan to change it. So I hope people take advantage of that.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. All right.
Dr. Jen Howk, everybody. If you want her back, leave me a comment down below and let us know. You can find Dr. Jen at esteemdynamics.com. I put the link down below too. You can also go to her website, jenhawk.com, for her newsletter. Get on her newsletter. She writes some great articles. I've gotten 2 in the last, week? That have been awesome. So
got that. Yeah.
Get on the Jen train if you're not there yet.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Dylan. This is great fun. It was always a pleasure.
Life's hard. All this technology. Ugh.
Seriously.
I'll have to keep practicing it.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Peter, for the super chat too, and everybody else who asked questions and interacted. It was fun. We'll do more of it. We'll see you on the next one.
Awesome.
Bye.